Well, are you worried about the state of the Canadian TV industry? Wondering if cross-border TV tariffs are coming? Don't get stuck up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. Plenty of Emmy Award-winning insight and perspective coming up next on Brio TV, the podcast. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Bill Brio. My guest on this episode is an executive producer who helped guide Schitt's Creek to a canoe full of Emmy and CSA awards. He's currently one of the executive producers on another wonderful sitcom, Son of a Critch, shockingly ignored nomination-wise at this year's Canadian Screen Awards. And yes, we will get to that. He's just back from France where he attended Series Mania, an industry marketplace where stakeholders gather to discuss where this crazy business is all heading worldwide. These are challenging times, not just for Canadian media companies, but also studios trying to sell shows. Are half hours dead? Does Rogers have any money for scripted fare now that $11 billion NHL deal is done? Will a wall be built around the U.S. market in this scary new age of tariffs? As Andrew said just before we started recording, it's a great time to be alive, right? As president of the Toronto Film School, Barnsley also talks about the challenges facing students keen on becoming the next generation of Canadian storytellers. How and where will they shop ideas and become crew members in an industry that services many American productions and not always enough Canadian? There's a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. Here he is, Andrew Barnsley. Yeah, now let's start. I want to talk about this trip. You're back from London just recently, and you were at this amazing media event, I guess an international sales happening, Series Here and Now. Tell me, just explain it a bit. I'm doing a terrible job.
Sure, yeah. So, I just came back from a couple days in London and and then attended the Series Mania festival in Lille, France.
Okay.
So Series Mania is sort of an event a festival I've heard about for a number of years. I wasn't really tracking it too closely, but I will tell you over the last couple of years, I've started to spend more time and dedicate more attention to kind of the overseas market, co-production opportunities, looking to build relationships with UK production companies and producers, Irish production companies and producers. And for the past 2 years, I've been attending Content London. And that takes place at the end of November every year. And that's a really interesting. It's not a festival. Maybe it feels more like a convention, less like a market. But it's an opportunity where people from, television stakeholders from around the world gather to kind of talk about the state of the industry, kind of trends, this sort of thing. And there's a very strong U.S. presence at Content London. So a lot of the speakers are, heads of American studios, this sort of thing. And it's great to go kind of gather intel. But what's been really good is to sort of build relationships with sort of the people in London and Europeans. And the last couple times I've been there, I really kind of started to get the sense that we're all producers in Canada and English-speaking producers in Europe are all kind of facing the same downward pressures on budgets. We're all trying to make shows that resonate with global audiences with, less resource. Just in terms of the market, we're, in a time when we're kind of more reliant on financing, we're reliant on big pieces coming out of the US. That's kind of not sort of a slam dunk anymore when we get things going. So a lot of conversations started at Content London about what are relationships we can build? How do we, as sort of global television producers, are there ways for us to think a bit differently? And what was great about Series Mania is that it was in March. It was about 3 months after Content London, so it was a really great time to reconnect with some of these producers that we met. And during those 3 months, we just started thinking, building projects. Okay, this is sharing slates and being like, okay, this is one that we could do as a Canada UK co-production. This is something we could do as a Canada Irish co-production. This is something where a German piece could come on board. So leading up to Series Mania, we'd start a lot of these conversations, and just like I said, a lot of this is just colored by there's not a lot of business coming out of America right now. We just know how that industry has, that town has, LA in particular, has just been facing a lot of challenges with, labor disruptions, the streaming wars kind of being over and the dust settling on all of that. So, Series Mania was just such a breath of fresh air.
Nice.
Getting there, and there was just this spirit of collaboration, where it was just groups of people, all with similar interests and passions and kind of businesses, trying to figure this out. And what was interesting is there was no American presence there. So we were able to have these conversations in ways. It's like, okay, if we get a piece out of the UK, this could work. If we can, and can we make creative work? So, there's a character from Canada and this sort of thing. So we're all, as a producer, you never want financing to drive creative. But when you have an idea that you feel that works and there is some malleability to it, then financing does take a seat in the conversation. And I just came out of Series Mania and my time in London just feeling like, okay, we're going to figure this out. There are pathways forward here. There's going to be no slam dunk sale that gets us greenlit. But the idea is like, let's build momentum. Let's share resources. Let's play to each other's strengths. Let's, in treaty co-productions, you're allowed to share, labor pools from both jurisdictions can attract sort of the soft money or the federal or the public incentives in both jurisdictions. So there's really ways to kind of tackle things a bit differently. So, which was really such an important kind of counterpoint for me, having spent a bit of time in LA in sort of mid-January and just kind of feeling how slow it is and hearing stories from producer friends of mine who are just like, it's things are not moving the way that we're used to, and we don't necessarily see the light at the end of the tunnel for the types of shows that we're producing. So I just felt it was really good. And I felt Canada is positioned quite well in terms of those conversations because we're used to dealing with smaller budgets. We're used to dealing with complicated financing plans. So anyway, very long-winded answer to tell you kind of what came out of it. But what came out of it for me is just, and I'm kind of kicking myself a little bit. I've spent really, the last 10 or 15 years of my career focused almost exclusively on building relationships in the US and how did those, and so I didn't really have a diversified group of relationships in terms of, countries and that sort of thing. And really kind of the takeaway for me is like, it's a global business now more than ever. Mm-hmm. We're all under the same kind of downward pressures in terms of financing and budget. There's like-minded people like me around the world, producers who know what they're doing, are willing to work to solve problems. So that's just kind of reoriented my thinking and how I think the direction of our industry, particularly Canada, is going to is going to evolve and grow, and I feel pretty good about it, frankly.
Okay. Speaking, of course, with Andrew Barnsley, executive producer, Schitt's Creek, son of a Critch, principal of the Toronto Film School, international man of television.
Wow, thanks.
Now,
That's a lot.
A lot. I'm listening to everything you just said, and boy, oh boy. First of all, the fact that there wasn't really an American presence at Series Mania is very interesting. It must be like being in Cuba, you know.
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Have you ever gone on vacation there? It's like a strange feeling. There's no Americans. It's all Germans and Canadians and everywhere else.
Yeah.
I've had the good fortune to go to MIPCOM over the years. In fact, Andrew, I think one of the first times I was there, I'm walking in and there's, I don't know if it was ITV or whatever, of this giant. MIPCOM is in France. It's at the Cannes. It's in this enormous, the Palace to whatever it is.
Yeah.
And there's all these booths. So all the networks, there's Disney, there's Warner's. And then of course there was this distributor for Schitt's Creek. And there was this giant, the side of the building was Eugene and Catherine O'Hara and everybody, Dan. And it was fascinating to see it from that perspective. It opened my mind that television is a borderless business. And, it's even 10 years ago, that was quite apparent. I think, remember the Canada Media Fund, there was a talk of, I think there's like 54 different nations with treaty deals with Canada, everywhere from South Africa to you name it. It's fascinating and an opportunity. And also, I agree with you. Canadians, in some ways, are so perfectly positioned to take advantage of this shift away from the big American market because we've been making TV on a dime for 70 years.
Yeah.
If I look at guys like Ron James and Mary Walsh now doing these shows for Five.
Yeah.
This is maybe the craft services budget on Schitt's Creek. This is not a lot of money, but they're doing it with friends and they're having a great time and they're telling stories. And that's, if you're just going to stay in a domestic market, you could do that.
Yes. Yep.
But if you're going to make, the next big show, Slow Horses, say, to pick one out of the air, you better have another couple of countries in on it, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and that's exactly what we're doing. We have a few projects we've identified, and international co-producing partners we've identified, and the idea is like, let's develop together, let's take to market together, so that those treaty co-production elements are baked into it. So when we go to market, when we pitch either in UK or Ireland or Canada, we're already kind of, not only are we pitching the creative materials, and hopefully that stands out, but we're also pitching a clear pathway to production financing as well.
Yeah. Like, when I think of Schitt's Creek, that was such a unicorn in that it actually created a network, in the States. It was the engine for pop. And
it was.
Brad Schwartz grabbed that and then pop, I think was sold to CBS and for a lot of money. So but where would you now, if you were out knocking on doors for Schitt's Creek now, you'd have to approach this internationally? Would it be, or would there be any scenario where it could have followed that same route?
That's a really good question. I think, one thing that I also have found is, and kind of seen, I think a lot of the path would be similar. We'd still be looking, I think Schitt's Creek would be a show that CBC would still get behind today, and in probably a very similar fashion. And then it's how do you what is your international strategy? And I think it would be quite similar in that on Schitt's Creek, we worked very closely with ITV Studios as our distributor. They came on board before Pop TV did. So they they came on board with the distribution advance. They deficit financed the show. That allowed us to be financed to order to produce it. And I think that's a model that would still work today. You see the distributors coming on board. So a lot of the international distributors were present at Series Mania. So ITV had a big presence. Fifth Season was there. Sort of the bigger distributors. And the conversation was around a couple of things. One, it seems like they're willing to invest more before a pre-sale happens. So that might be what would be a bit different with Schitt's Creek, where a distributor might be like, okay, we may not see the sale we want to see for 2 or 3 seasons. So the distributor in that case is like, let's build our catalog, let's build a library, knowing that we're building a creative asset and we'll take it to market when the timing is right. One of the differences, though, between now and then is half-hour comedies are really tough. We've taken a few to market recently, and a couple, in fact, we've had to go back to the creators and say, can this work as a 1 hour?
Wow. For
some reason, I think they're harder to schedule on a broadcast schedule. But that seems to be where the appetite seems to land from global audiences, more on the 1 hour side of things. So that might have been that the environment's maybe changed a bit in the last 10 or 15 years there, just in terms of that appetite. But Schitt's Creek is an exception. I think the model, if I had a Schitt's Creek now, that would I'd probably go down a similar pathway that we did with Schitt's Creek then. I mean, one of the challenges, though, is, Son of a Critch, we're, hopefully going into our 5th season with that, fingers crossed. Mm-hmm. But we had a home on the CW in the US.
Yeah.
That was with Brad. Yep. Yeah.
And I know, and I've spoken to Brad. Brad loved the show. I love the show.
Yep.
It is a very regional show, and then you always feel that, well, if you tell a true story about a place, it will resonate with people all over the world. If it's interesting. But as you say, the market for half hours on network broadcast is. I mean, there's Chuck Lorre has a show on a half, and that's about it now.
Yeah.
So where do you put it? And you had it there, and now, of course, it's at Netflix. Talk about that, transitioning Schitt's from one to the other.
I'm
sorry. Son of a Critch. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's on. So that's. It's on Netflix in Canada. It's not on Netflix globally.
Okay.
Right now. And it's the first 2 seasons of it. So there's 4 seasons available of Son of a Critch. All 4 are available on CBC Gem, and 2 are available on Netflix Canada.
Gotcha.
So I think, there is some recognition that on CBC, and CBC does that. We're not responsible for that deal. The producers aren't, because CBC has the Canadian rights. And
Gotcha.
I think what they're doing is they want to make sure that they're getting the most out of the title, and they're getting the most out of CBC Gem. So what they're doing is offering up 2 seasons or half the season. They're doing the same thing with Schitt's Creek as well. Season 1 to 3 are on Netflix in Canada, and to get the back 6, it's on, or so the back 3, it's on Gem. So the idea is to drive. My understanding is that the idea is to drive those viewers, get them interested. Recognizing that Netflix has sort of a broader audience reach, get audiences pulled into the show, love the shows, and then if they want to see, finish out the seasons. They migrate to Gem.
Andrew, that's a great idea in theory. I wonder if a lot of people know that. Like, I didn't know that that you could watch 3 seasons here and 3 seasons there. So I hear the strategy, but I just wonder if people, when they get to the end of what they're watching on Netflix, if they realize there's a way to the other,
That's a really good. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know. I'd like to think people smarter than me have thought about that, but the fact that you don't, I don't know.
Well, that's not a very high level to measure anything there. That's kind of going backwards. We'll be back after this short break with Andrew Barnsley.
This month on Super Channel Fuse, check out the Canadian premiere of Night Sleeper, April 17th. In this wide-awake 6-part thriller, hackers send a Glasgow to London train hurtling towards death and destruction, as 2 strangers then go to extremes to regain control before it's too late. Meanwhile, over on Super Channel Heart and Home, it's season 2 of When Hope Calls. This spin-off of the smash hit romantic drama When Calls the Heart stars Canadians Cindy Busby and Christopher Russell. She's the new lawyer in town on a mission. He's the Mountie who sees her as a person of interest. Before you can say good day, ma'am, courting ensues. Tune in for Night Sleeper and When Hope Calls, plus uncut, commercial-free movies galore this and every month on Super Channel, available via most cable providers across the country.
Here he is again, Andrew Barnsley. Yeah, so it seems CBC has this perfect schedule for Son of a Critch, because you've got Mark Critch at 8, and then you got Son of a Critch at 8:30, so they have an hour. But it seems internationally, you need to create a spin-off from Son of a Critch, focus on the older son and his girlfriend, do Mandy and whatever's first wedding.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. Make an hour show, right?
Listen, we're thinking about all of it right now. Mark is so beloved at CBC.
Yeah.
And I love working with Mark, and there's something there. And how do we, like I said before, you don't want kind of the marketplace or financing to drive creative, but at the same time, that's the reality of the situation. So how do you create shows that address the demand, that address the marketplace, and are financeable? So no, I've had a handful of conversations with Mark about that, like what makes sense, and how do we keep Son of a Critch going, but are there other avenues to go down?
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's writing more books, and we can spin them off.
That guy works so hard. I don't know how he does it. It's incredible.
It had a killer year on 22 Minutes as Trump. He's really, really killing it. And now, boy, we could talk about sitcoms on and on. We got. Are you going to Banff this year? Do you set something on your schedule as well?
No. Banff is not really on my calendar. I do see some value in going, but I don't go to it every year. It comes at sort of an odd time of the year. We're often in pre-production or that, things like that. And a lot of it is Canadian producers trying to get time with Canadian buyers. And a lot of those Canadian buyers are Toronto-based. So if you're a Toronto-based producer, they tend to focus on the non-Toronto-based, building the relationships and having the meetings with non-Toronto-based producers. So it sometimes it makes sense to sit it out. I like to go if there's a real reason for me to go. But in terms of the networking and the socializing, there's other opportunities throughout the year that make a bit more sense to me.
I raise it because Chuck Lorre is going to be the keynote speaker, and I'm not going to be there either. But I would be curious to hear his thoughts on sitcoms today and half hours today, and I wonder what where he sees it. That question comes up. I've covered TV for 40 plus years, and every 3 years is the sitcom dead, and then something comes along and no one asks that question again. But it does seem like it's a bit different now. I don't.
Well, also, I do, and it's a bit of a moving target. There's conversations that come up. It's like, is the multicam back? There's that always the conversation that comes up, seems to bubble up every 5 or 10 years. Mm-hmm. But also the question of what is comedy. I can tell you, and I've had a conversation with the Academy about this, but this year's CSA nominations, Son of a Critch wasn't nominated really in any of the major comedy categories. So I just wanted to kind of drill down on that a little bit. Like, why is that? This is, Canada's top rated comedy. Right. Other playback refers to it as a comedy. It sits in a comedy night on the CBC schedule. And then, we weren't nominated for last year. We won the Audience Choice Award, CSA. And this year not to be nominated as Best Comedy Series, any of our actors nominated in sort of the major roles, none of our directors, none of our writers. No. I just had a lot of questions come out of that. And what it comes down to is, what is comedy, and is comedy based on the number of times you laugh, or is it based on, whether it sits in a half-hour time slot or not? And so you have different camps there.
You raise a great issue. I mean, even in the States for their awards, The Bear or whatever that's nominated for Best Comedy. I've had a problem. The CSAs, don't get me started. I don't want to look. Folks have to celebrate and have awards, and that's awesome. And you've won many, and I know other folks who are very deserving. But I have seen instances where they have a Best Late Night Talk Show category in Canada, and I'm like, what? Where? Like, and then that Man with a Van in Hamilton wins or something, or at the Sock spinoff show, because there aren't any. And it just seems like it's a collection of things that they can get sponsorship for. And so I'm very cynical about it, but I also appreciate, a lot of hard work and people who deserve to get recognition.
I think that's what stung the most is, our team was just feeling so good about the season that was being up for consideration this year, the CSAs. We really wanted to celebrate it. Like I said, we were coming off the Audience Choice Award win last year, and then it was just disappointing. You want to celebrate your teams and congratulate your teams and take a moment to kind of reflect on all the work that everybody put into it. And, we were, to me, it's less about the awards and that sort of thing, but it is just like, how do we celebrate our team or kind of what we built together?
Look, Andrew, I think the highest award you can get in Canadian television is not to be nominated for a Canadian Screen Award.
Okay, I'll take that.
Look, the Royal Canadian Air Force never won a Gemini, never nominated for a Gemini. They only won the People's Choice Award. So that's what happened. There's the shame of the process means that they have to have a People's Choice Awards, or else nothing that people watch will actually be on the CSA gala. And it's embarrassing, I think. I don't know. I don't understand it. I understand you want to spread credit around, but that there's something broken there. And it happens year after year. And certainly if there's a finer sitcom in not just Canada, but North America than Son of a Critch right now, I'd like to see it. Because
I will. Yeah, well, I will give the Academy credit. I did get in touch with them immediately after the nominations came out. They wanted to have a conversation with me right away to kind of ask how, if I can help them improve some of their kind of, criteria for judging and for the juries and this sort of thing. So they did actively participate in that conversation, and I'm happy to do that. Like, I'm happy to kind of come in and work with them. Really, coming back to what I was saying earlier, it's just like I want to work for the teams and make sure that we're celebrating the right way. But yeah, so credit to them for listening and being open to having those conversations and looking at ways to change. And we'll see how that plays out. But yeah, it's too bad because the Academy plays an important role. They do a lot. There's education initiatives. There's, initiatives for underrepresented voices and emerging talent and all this. These are very important things. So I don't want to judge it all based on the CSAs, but yeah, I do want to support, but sometimes it's difficult.
Yes. I feel we must move on.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. Yeah. Thanks, Bill. Yeah. Let's get out of this.
Speaking of educational component, and one of your other hats, of course, at the Toronto Film School, where you have thriving classes in all kinds of disciplines. But I want to ask you about this. It's a strange time, and this is all part of this whole industry thing, this feeling you had probably in January, you said, just about changes in media and the landscape, even like the TV critics, the Television Critics Association. Looks like we're at the end of the road there in terms of our semi-annual press tours, because the media business in the States that used to be, you'd go down, there'd be ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox, and all the rest. They're all now owned by just three big media companies, and they have their own megaphones and their own way of getting the word out, and they don't really need to gather critics to do that in a hotel in Pasadena anymore. So, even whatever reporters are left are feeling this contraction that's happening in the industry. It seems to be happening even in education, from what I understand. Sheridan, Seneca, Mohawk, Humber, they're either scaled back or ended media studies, and that's. I mean, explain that to me, and how is it impacting the Toronto Film School?
Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with, without knowing anything about any of those programs and sort of the internal issues they've been facing, a lot has to do with the reliance on international students. And that's just been something that has impacted post-secondary education across the country. So there's not a single institution that hasn't felt the impacts of those changes. Yeah. So that's sort of the first thing to say. The other thing that I can say from the Toronto Film School perspective, we're not a public funded school. We're a private school. And one of the things that makes it a bit different for us is that we know we need to be servicing not only the industry today, but the industry in the future. And what that means is we follow industry data very closely. We want to make sure that we're pivoting and refreshing our curriculum all the time to make sure that our students are set ready, that they have the best equipment available. And so, while other schools in this space have been downsizing and cutting programs, we've actually been doing the opposite. Last September, we made an announcement that we were upgrading all of our camera and production equipment. So we made a $2.5 million investment in new cameras, new lighting and grip equipment. We built out new partnerships and collaborative relationships with industry stakeholders to make sure that our students were getting sort of access to cutting edge technology, that the cameras that they're using for their student films are the ones that are being used on the sets when they transition. So that's one thing. The other thing that we did last year, and I think this is something that we haven't seen with any of the public schools in the media space is we've really embraced AI as well.
Wow.
So we've beginning kind of last sort of 2020, early 2024, sort of Q1, we started to feel, okay, AI, there's this groundswell of AI happening. There's no way it's not going to touch, the creative industries. How do we get ahead of it? And how do we not be scared of it? How do we embrace it? Because we know the industry will embrace it. So one of the very first things we did was hire a director of AI just to come in, full-time director of AI.
Wow.
His job is just to be looking at all of our curriculum.
Is this a real person or a robot?
That's a really good question. It's the right question too. No, this is seasoned sort of television professional, producer, but had been using AI in a lot of his productions, both on the production and the post-production side. And he was somebody I've known for a while, and he was just like, we need to be ahead of the curve on this. So he's now going through the process of, making sure our students have access to the software that is driving sort of industry growth on the AI side, that all of our programs are incorporating AI where it makes sense to. So that's one thing. So it's new equipment. It's AI, incorporating and embracing AI in our curriculum. And then the third thing we're doing is, while other schools are looking to cut programs, we're looking to add programs that are sort of reflective of kind of industry trends. So one of the things that we're watching very closely is sort of the creator culture, the creator economy. So, you look at the amount of content that is viewed on YouTube that's not produced by, studios and funded by conventional buyers and broadcasters.
Yeah.
It's enormous. And it's how do we, and those are real career paths now. Sort of this content creation, we refer to it as the creator economy. So what are the programs we should be thinking about that support that and support these potential careers for students who want to come in? They want to learn how to create for platforms beyond just sort of the conventional platforms that we're used to.
Well, that's really smart. I watch a lot of YouTube. I have to say, I'm always stumbling. I collect 16 millimeter film of fall preview reels from the 60s and 70s. It's nostalgic, but I've watched stuff on there that it's like Bob and Ed and his friends have made like a 90-minute documentary about this. And it's pretty good. Yeah. I'm thinking, wow, it's entertaining, it's informative. So I think you're onto something there for sure. And the AI, my daughter, Katie, who's a graphic designer at Shopify, she's just coming off a very generous maternity leave. And I was just talking to her and I said, what's been the big adjustment? She said, AI coming, like it's just the leap now. It just taking, half a year or a year off, you've missed a chunk of the thing that's coming at us with great speed. So I think that's a very wise decision to bring programs like that to educate and train people. So hats off to you there. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, when I started at Toronto Film School in this role, it really, my whole philosophy was where does a film school fit into the creative industry's ecosystem? How do we see ourselves as a meaningful contributing stakeholder? And I think to do that, you really need to be able to move with the trends, address the trends. And thankfully, how Toronto Film School is built and the support we have with our parent company and the ownership group, it really allows us to do that. And we're strongly and deeply committed to the creative industries. We have, film production isn't our only program. We have a writing program that's run by Michelle Daly, who I'm sure you remember, who ran comedy at CBC and at CTV. We have a graphics design program. We have an acting program, and we have 2 video game programs as well. So there's 6 programs, and it's all with an eye just to, be feeding the creative industries in Canada.
Well, it's wonderful that there's those opportunities for students, and we've talked about this too, right across Canada, even if getting our stories in front of Canadians is a challenge. There's no shortage of work in terms of service production. I interview people all the time who are in Sudbury and Parry Sound and Hamilton and all over British Columbia. And I know in parts of Canada and BC a few years ago, there were so many shows that they had to run out and create grips, basically round people up and show them how to hold boom mics, like it was literally because there's just not enough training in the crafts, right? And that's something you're addressing with the Toronto Film School.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that came out of, in 2022, my company was producing Kids in the Hall, Jan, and Son of a Critch. And that was those were shows in Calgary, Toronto, and St. John's, Newfoundland. Across the board, we were dealing with labor shortages and sort of unskilled or untrained labor coming on, working with that. So it really felt like a real opportunity as a school. It's like, how do we get ahead of this? So, I work closely with the unions in that role to sort of address any pain points they might be having. How do we, and they've helped us, the unions and the film commissions across the country have helped us identify programs to invest in terms of building them out through surveying their membership, that sort of thing. So it's really, again, how do we be a stakeholder in all of this?
Right. Yeah.
Excuse me.
That's the important part for sure. Don't go away. Andrew will be right back. Time once again to check in with Emily Gagne to see what's new on Hollywood Suite. Emily, what do you got?
Well, this month, Bill, we've got a new episode of Cinema A to Z, which is our original series. And the topic this time is acting debuts.
Acting. So these are the first films of some famous stars. Go ahead and quiz me. Throw a name at me, see if I can get the film.
How about Barbra Streisand?
Oh, that's The Mirror Has Two Noses. Is that
No.
it? No. It's Funny Girl.
Yes,
right.
Okay. A little further back.
All right. Okay. Well, that sounds pretty good. What else do you have coming up this month?
Well, we've got National Canadian Film Day, April 16th. So we've got Canadian films all day. But if you are in more of a, funny mood, it's April Fool's Day. We've got our LOL collection, got comedies from throughout cinematic history, everything from, The 7-Year Itch to Caddyshack to Liar Liar to The Nice Guys, which I think is an underrated comedy.
Oh, that's a funny film. Well, that sounds great. Looks like a good time to laugh in Canada on Hollywood Suite. Thanks very much, Emily.
Thank you, Bill.
What's new this month on Paramount Plus? Well, first up, dive into the intricate web of a powerful crime family in the Paramount Plus original series, Mobland, from Guy Ritchie. Tom Hardy, Pierce Brosnan, Helen Mirren, and Joanne Froggatt all star. In mid-April, catch the premiere of The Carters, Hurts to Love You. This 2-part documentary looks back at teen heartthrobs Nick and Aaron Carter. Their story is told by Aaron's twin sister, Angel, who unpacks the complicated family dynamics that led to the untimely death of 3 of the original 5 Carter kids, as well as their father. Speaking of music documentaries, Paramount Plus has the season 2 premiere of Family Legacy, which offers a peek inside the lives of influential musicians and bands through the lens of their close family members. This season features interviews with relatives of Busta Rhymes, Lil Wayne, Rob Thomas, Daddy Yankee, Lil Jon, and more. There's not little about this month on Paramount Plus. There's lots for the entire family. Check it out. And we're back. It's you mentioned Kids in the Hall. It's been fun seeing Mark McKinney on This Hour is 22 Minutes. He's on again. We're talking on a Tuesday here. Tuesday, there's an episode of This Hour is 22 Minutes where Mark is returning as Carney, right? He's playing, it's fun to see them pair on that show. I really enjoyed your season of Kids, the revival. I thought it was brilliant. It was them, mature version, and I thought it was those guys. I don't think they were ever funnier. I thought it was a pretty good year. So
I loved it.
Yeah.
They nailed it.
Yeah, they sure
they
did.
really did. And to they hadn't really been, that show hadn't been on in 30 years, and they're as sharp as ever. They're as relevant as ever.
Yeah.
And they had evolved and kept their sensibilities intact and their punk rock nature intact. I loved it. I was so proud of that show. And of course, having grown up watching it was pretty special.
It was funny and moving and everything. It really worked.
Yeah.
All right. Now the next hard conversation we got while you're here, I'm throwing it all at you, Andrew, and I'm, not fair, but you're smart. So you'll give me some answers. Just the Canadian media scene, it's, as we're talking, it's tough everywhere. It's tough in the States, but Rogers just, they've invested in NHL rights for $11 billion. So I'm thinking, well, good luck getting the next Hudson and Rex sold there. It's, there's not going to be a lot of, the envelope is shrinking for scripted shows, perhaps. CBC has got one in the election coming up. There's one party you'd like to defund it, or the English language part of it. Yeah. Bell, everybody's like bleeding from, people stealing to the Discovery Network from in the dark of the night from away from them. There's just been a lot of shenanigans going on. And then in Port Chorus, holy smokes, they got this. There's if you look at the ratings and numbers, their imports are killing it on Global, and yet they got this big $1 billion problem, right? So, what do you make of this in terms of people who are trying to sell shows to Canadian networks? Is the doors are, going to have to be knocked on pretty loudly, I think, to get anything sold.
Yeah. I think it would be very tough for me to be starting my career now. I think about that a lot. When I started, it was kind of the beginning. It was never easy to get shows going, but it was when digital specialty channels were coming online, and there was more money for lower budget shows and this sort of thing. So that's just not really the case anymore. It's challenging at every level. But where I think a couple things. One, I think with the threat that we've seen kind of from south of the border to I know it's a lot of bluster but we feel a bit of a threat to our sovereignty. And I think that has done something to really unite the country in a surprising way. And I think when you start to think deeply on what that is, it's what does unite a country is culture and its stories and its music and its it is the cultural industries. And that's where I think, I kind of, as painful as it's been to kind of be living through the last few months, here and the constant threats we hear on the news, there is something. The silver lining to me is seeing the country unite with sort of even like, buy Canadian. And it's just like, I know at my home, all my kids and everybody is like, okay, is this Canadian? Do we buy it or not? And I'd like to think that spirit, translates a bit to sort of the cultural industries and how we're consuming our own stories. So I feel there's a bit of hope there. At the same time, kind of speaking to what I was saying earlier, just about co-productions. I just think, when we're thinking about getting our stories out there, we need to be thinking about how do we tell our stories through a global lens. And it's how do we tell our stories with connectivity to other countries around the world. And we do live in a global economy. We live in sort of global pop culture. And I think there are clear pathways to that. And, I look at Canadian, to me, like a perfect example is Blackberry. I had nothing to do with that, but as an audience member, I just loved it. And it's like, here is a massive global Canadian story that was told so well and, found audiences around the world. So it's not insurmountable. There are these stories that are out there. We have such a deep bench in terms of talent, both on screen and off. And it's like, how do we think, how do we think a bit differently? Because, these broadcasters, they still want to support Canadian stories. Like, they're in tough spots too. They're in tough financial spots. And, they are trying to work with producers. And, we've seen it with, I feel it with CBC every day. I feel it with Bell, with media, with some of the projects we have there. It's like, let's figure this out together. And so the point being, it's like the spirit of collaboration I was talking about earlier. I just think that's the way forward. What's tricky for emerging producers and emerging talent is that all of this is relationships, right? So you can't go to school and have relationships. So it's, you have to, figure things out and get experience and get your hours and all of that. So that's kind of challenging. And sometimes, it costs money to go to conferences around the world and markets around the world. So the barrier of entry is higher, but at the same time, I do feel and believe that, Canadians, there is an appetite for high quality Canadian content, and both on the consumer side and on the buyer side. And even with the international distributors, Canada, people want to talk about Canada. So I tend to be overly optimistic sometimes, but I do feel there's something here. Yeah.
I think, if you're whoever gets a show called Elbows Up, ready first is going to sell it. And, I'm sure, why not? There should be a show, the Amazing Tariff Race or Survivor Tariffs or something, right? I think
you're onto something, Bill.
You got to get now. And St. Pierre seems to be what you're talking about too. It's an interesting experiment in that it does cross a couple of cultures. It's the CBC show, Alan Hocko, and it's set in Saint Pierre and Miquelon. And, there's a French aspect to it. So that does maybe open a door to other thinking along those lines across Canada. Certainly the North is suddenly becoming a hot area. And hopefully that's something that will play in for Canadian producers and people.
Those are two very good sort of case studies of these, very specifically Canadian shows that big industry players are investing in. So Netflix on the North of North and fifth season on St. Pierre. And it's like, and they wouldn't be doing that if they didn't think there were audiences and there were pathways to, profit, et cetera. So it's those sorts of things that give me hope.
Give you hope. Well, part of and I always think too, and don't answer or even comment, but sometimes it's just the wrong name on a show can kill it. Like Schitt's Creek is a sterling example of the right name for a TV show. There have been shows in the past like Pretty Hard Cases. If that had been called Elbows Up, it would still be on the air.
Yes.
So I think you got to get the name right. And finally, well, it is. And, they didn't want Schitt's Creek, did they? There was
no
pushback, right? No. And you guys managed to turn that around, right?
Yeah. Thankfully, Eugene and Dan were able to pull a page out of a phone book from somewhere that actually proved it was a real last name.
Good for them. Is there an impact, speaking of tariffs, on how that is? Does that have an impact on Canadian television industry, on production? Is there a tariff on content or intellectual property, or I don't know? Is that anything to be factored coming?
Not yet. Nothing formal yet. I think we're all kind of on the edge of our seat, waiting for kind of the penny to drop on that. I think a lot. We'll probably have the attention of the Trump administration when C-11 works its way through the RTC and some, regulations land. I think that's when there will be likely be some kind of reaction to it. I don't think, given kind of the climate, I don't think our industries are going to be immune to it. But right now we're kind of trying to, stay under the radar and, hopefully we can weather whatever gets thrown at us.
It's interesting though. I mean, imagine, as long as the Canadian dollar is low, they're going to shoot When Calls the Heart in Langley, BC.
Yeah.
Except if there's a problem with that and it has to be shot in Atlanta.
Right. Exactly.
So something to keep an eye on. I hope that doesn't get that ridiculous, because for so many reasons, the crews and the people that you're training now are at such a peak efficiency here that it makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons to come north and get these shows made. Andrew, congratulations on all your success and everything else you got going on. Are you, despite the oversight with Son of a Critch, you have other shows that are in nomination at the Canadian Screen Awards?
We don't this year. No, that was all our eggs were in that basket this year. So.
Well, that's fine. Another reason I don't have to watch the Canadian Screen Awards.
There you go.
Honestly, just buy a new hockey helmet and peel the CSA sticker off the Canadian safety, and then just put it on a medallion, and then give one.
Problem solved.
Yeah.
I like it.
Anyway, thank you for your time. Very generous today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Is there anything we're leaving out in terms of projects?
No. The only thing I might add is just going back to Toronto Film School for a second. Every year we do a massive sort of showcase event at the Steam Whistle Brewery just underneath CN Tower and Rogers Center. And it's just a great, I'll be speaking. It's an opportunity to walk around, really for us to show off kind of what we do. And that's on April 26th, on Saturday of later this month. So if there is anybody who's interested in thinking about a career in the creative industries, I think the timing is really good, and we'd love to show it off to you. So
prospective students can check out your program.
Exactly.
And when, if somebody went and they found out some information, is this for fall studies? How soon?
We have some of our programs we have 4 intakes a year, depending on the program. Mm-hmm. So it's done on sort of a semester basis. So quarterly, we have new intakes. So depending on the program. Yeah.
All right. Well, congrats there, and all the best with that. Have a great event at the Steam Whistle below the CN Tower on April 26th.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Good to see you again.
Likewise, Bill. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. My thanks again to Andrew Barnsley. Just love guests who tell it like it is and share great insights. He's truly both a student and a teacher when it comes to television. Thanks as always to producer Phil Hong, who could launch his own school of podcasting. My thanks as always to BJ Del Conte, Paul Boudra, and all the crispy critters, and my late great piano man pal Stephen Dudley for the music heard on these episodes. Finally, thank you, listener. If you liked what you heard, please spread the word. I'm Bill Brio. Thanks for listening.